then what ends up happening is I'm just trying to find my place again. There we go. So because he's on the hunt for Snowball, he then gets the dogs to elicit false confessions from 4 of the pigs who dissented against him chasing Snowball out because they were going to vote for him, because of course all the voting was done among the pigs and not all the pigs always agreed. And the dogs then just rip their throats out, and that immediately breaks the commandment of no animal will kill another animal, and they retroactively change that to without just cause. So who determines just cause? Oh, it just so happens to be Napoleon every single time. And then he tries to get false confessions from everyone else, including the chickens, the small axe, the rebellion. One of them says that Snowball visited them at night in a dream and compelled them to attack someone else. And so the dogs just kill all of them, and it becomes a mass slaughter event to keep all of the other animals in line.
I think it ends by saying there's a pile of bodies at Napoleon's feet. Well, so those 4 pigs, 4, I think it's the younger or smaller pigs that were mentioned earlier in the novel as well. That episode is the show trials,
yes,
of the 30s, the purges, the terror. I think it's an absolute turning point in the book. What it is, and as it was a massive turning point in Stalinist Russia. So what they would do, if anyone who didn't know, is that a lot of the old Bolsheviks were put on trial. Their fate was already absolutely predetermined, yeah. And it's a literal show trial where they would confess everything they'd done wrong. And it's mad. They're confessing, they're saying things like, I was always working for the Americans or working for the Tsar. Someone like Zinoviev or something, it would be saying that. And it's like, well, it's complete insanity. Of course, that's a fake confession. But you can sort of Stalin was able to get people to do that. Sometimes when they would absolutely refuse, where they were just executed behind closed doors anyway. But anyway, the show trials are a really important thing. Anyone that is sympathetic to communism, learn about the show trials of the 30s. And it's very difficult to remain a communist sympathiser.
That's what does my nut in about Arthur Miller's The Crucible. Again, I performed it, I loved doing it. And it's a well-written play until you realise it's meant to be an allegory for, as we discussed in our English literature curriculum video, McCarthyism. Ooh. It's like, Arthur, there were literal show trials in the Soviet Union. Like, there were people in the Soviet Union, like John Proctor, who were killed for nothing. They were accused of doing completely nothing. These hysterical people that confess to seeing things that weren't there. Or like it's literally, there's the where was it? The 2 sheep killed an old ram who said that Napoleon had visited them in a dream and told them to do it. The devil made me do it.
Snowball.
Yeah. Sorry. Snowball visited them in a dream.
Yeah.
And the idea that McCarthyism was executing people en masse like John Proctor, who stood up and said, I've done nothing wrong, I'm not a witch, when that had happened in the 30s, and this was written by a man who was sympathetic to the communists, is just deeply subversive and evil.
Well, there's one rule for the leftists, one rule for the rest of us. That's the way it's always been. Yeah,
but it's unfortunate that it's taught in schools as that way.
But I think the show trials of the 30s, people like George Orwell, and lots of other people that were sympathetic to various degrees to sort of the international workers' movement, they saw that for what it was. George Orwell wasn't fooled by the show trials whatsoever, but many were still.
C. Wright Mills, loads of the French postmodernists still made excuses for
Malcolm Muggeridge. Well, there's people today that say it's all just Western propaganda, aren't there? There may even be comments on YouTube where people say that we've been blinded by Western propaganda. Stalin didn't do nothing wrong. Some people today will still say that. Or they'll just brush over it. Some bread tubers or something were saying, well, no, Stalin was correct really to get rid of those people. They were undermining the project or something. Well,
that is, Jordan Peterson once articulated it as in the Bible, the sin against the Holy Ghost is never identified, but it is the one thing you can't come back from. It's the one thing that you aren't allowed to be redeemed to get into heaven. And the closest thing he could think of was the statement, real communism has never been tried, because it positions you as the arbiter of perfect communist doctrine and says, if only I were in charge, I wouldn't have committed all those murderous purges. I would have only killed the right people. I would have brought the communist utopia to its apotheosis. And so you're standing upon the historical graves of so many people, stacking the bodies like a Tower of Babel reaching heaven, and you still think you aren't the most conceited, disgusting person alive. Like there's no hope for you if you genuinely believe that you would have done any different with this doctrine that incentivizes you genociding people by class.
I think of all the mountain of lies that leftists say and tell themselves, the one that communism has never really been tried, that's the most pernicious one.
Yeah.
That's the most disgusting lie they say, is that it's never really been tried properly. That's just wrong. That's a lie. That's false. It's been tried many, many times, various different stripes of it, and they all end in almost the same way. Mass graves of famine victims.
I'm going to write something on this at some point, because I did quite a while ago, and it was approved by an actual communist saying, yeah, that's about right, which was unsettling for my masters. It's that the dictatorship of the proletariat, endemic to the communist ideal, always ensures that genocide will happen. And it is the goal of communism to instantiate that, because we're never given a roadmap to dismantle it. All we're given is the roadmap to violent revolution, mass theft, dictatorship, and the execution of your enemies. And then somehow from that bloody exercise, stateless, classless, abundant utopia where everyone's virtuous is meant to arise. That's too nebulously defined. I think you're just clinging to this doctrine because you want the power and you want to kill the people you hate. There's something about that. And that's why in this, so Clover immediately starts crying about the fact that animalist doctrine has been perverted and it's become a hellish dystopia. Again, it's not placable to the Soviet project in the Allegory, because it was always going to be that. If anything's built on Marxism, it always becomes it degenerates inevitably into a murderous dystopia.
So just quickly to finish up then on the show trials and the where Napoleon reveals himself to be a murderous tyrant.
Yeah.
George Orwell says, there is a pile of bodies at his feet. And so now the original ideas that old Major had have been entirely abandoned. If the key of those maxims is that no animal should ever kill another animal, that's been completely abandoned.
Yes.
So now you're dealing with just pure fantasy land, pure fiction.
I think that's a fault line though between the analogy, because of course Marx never said no human should be killed. He only says no proletariat. Right. Okay. And that's it's not like the old Major originally said no pig shall be killed, and then the dogs have come in and torn the pig's throats out. It was never a universalist doctrine of brotherhood and fealty. It was always us and them.
It's interesting how strong it is that a lot of the animals, even much, much later in the book, even by the end of the book, and in history, the equivalent is even in the late 1980s and 1990s, there's still millions of people
coping.
Just coping with it, still lying to themselves about it all.
Well, that's the entire postmodern project. It's repositioning Marxism to snap up a new identity that it can leverage to foment a new revolution. And so they're still trying. That's what intersectionality is. It's raising critical consciousness, grievance mongering to the point of where people are so mad, they do a 2020 and they go out and burn down civilization. And it just so happens in the aftermath that because all those barbarians they're now hungry for blood, they appoint the people who originally wrote the doctrine as their masters, and they just rule over them in perpetuity. It's a praxeological tool to make you miserable, nihilistic, angry, so that the people that wrote it can get into power. As if animalism was going to end up any other way. No Soviet state or no other communist state ever did. And that's why he ends up getting rid of Beasts of England. That seems to be the final death knell in the dream of old Major, is that he gets rid of Beasts of England and just replaces it with four legs good, two legs bad. It's only the elements of Marxism which are adversarial, which are scaremongering. It says that the capitalist West is going to come and invade our borders if we don't expand and don't arm up. That's left in the Soviet Union, so it becomes this paranoid superstate devouring its own citizens.
So just to stay on that, they have a song in the book, don't they? The Beasts of England, which I think is L'Internationale.
Yes, it goes to the other farms. Like other animals start singing it after the original animals have conquered Animal Farm.
I've obviously know the English words to the Internationale, and it's to my mind just crazy pinko nonsense. And in real history, Stalin, I think towards the end of the war, I think like 1944 or something, he abandoned. He says, "You're not supposed to sing that. We'll now sing the Russian or Soviet national anthem."
Yep.
And then because you don't want people to have a new revolution against his regime. And so anyway, in the book they have there's a new song, isn't there, for the farm.
Yeah.
But one last point I'll just say is the idea of 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, and the sheep continually bleating it. It's like the sheeple. That's a thing people say nowadays, isn't it? Sheeple. George Orwell's hit on that early with the sheep just keep bleating. But again, that's what quite often, not exclusively, but often leftist regimes, certainly in China, they love a slogan, a very, very, very simple slogan that doesn't even need to make any sense, like Build Back Better. Doesn't need to necessarily even make proper sense.
My body, my choice.
It's just for an idiot to keep repeating.
It is
because the original maxim is longer and more complicated than 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, isn't it?
Yes.
But the sheep reduce it to 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. Again, Orwell sort of he's hit the nail right on the head there with that, hasn't he?
Yeah, he hits on the weaponising of midwifery, which this is a sort of conversation we've had off air before. Have you ever had an argument with someone who's genuinely not that intelligent, and they get one phrase that you've said or their own idea just stuck in their head and they can't let it go and they just have to keep repeating it. So the argument never gets solved because there's just that one thought rattling around up there and nothing else. And that's why ideologies are so powerful and persuasive to midwits, because I think they have a genuine crushing sense of their own mediocrity. And so they look for an all-compromising, comprehensive, mappable understanding of the world. It's told them why they're so mediocre, it's someone else's fault, and if you just learn it by heart and impose it onto reality, then suddenly it not only makes you the smartest person in the room, but it gives you that power trip that you've always been longing and afraid they're actually too dumb to implement. And so it becomes really easy for the sheep to recite this because they're immediately on the side of the guy with the gun, and that means that they're never at threat of having their throats torn out by the dogs.
To watch the full video, please become a premium member at lotuseaters.com.